Hello, hello. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome in to the Fantasy Roundup here on the bet.NOLA.com channels. What's up? What's up? I'm your host for this afternoon, Spencer the Guru Urquhart, here with my co-host Gabe Henderson. How you doing, Gabe?
Doing great. How are you, Spencer?
Awesome, man. Yeah, I can't complain. Just got a lot to talk about today. Fantasy baseball draft starting up, the NFL Combine just wrapping up, so we'll have some rookie stock reports with our special guest who will be on in about 10-15 minutes. Justin from Fantasy Follow over on Instagram. Big shout out to him for being our guest this afternoon. And before we get to that, though, we've got a few housekeeping things here from our partners at Caesars Sportsbook. Make sure to go check out Caesars. First bet on us. Use the promo code NOLAFULL. Get up to $12.50 back as a free bet if you don't win. And also, we've got our LSU poster giveaway, set of 3. Bet $10 and receive a commemorative poster set. So for all those of y'all that like the Tigers, that's a pretty cool deal there, I'd say. So yeah, man, we've got a lot to talk about, Gabe. We've got a lot of NFL headlines, but I guess to start, man, what are your initial thoughts on Derek Carr? Because Derek Carr, the big elephant in the room here. Breaking news: Derek Carr signing with the Saints yesterday. Big 4-year contract, $100 million guaranteed. Man, this is big news here. Right before free agency even started, the new league year until next week.
Yeah, for sure. And I know this is a fantasy show, so it doesn't necessarily have implications there, but this move overall is going to be a lot better for Derek Carr. He's finally going to have a defense, and I think he's got some good weapons around him. I think this will boost the fantasy value of everyone on the Saints offense. Overall, great move for the Saints. They jumped ahead of everyone in their division with this. They now have the best quarterback in the division. And with the news that Atlanta won't be in the running for Lamar, I think that solidifies Derek Carr as the best quarterback in the NFC South next year.
Yeah, I can't argue with that because I feel like with Derek Carr, you can hate on him and say, oh, he's never won a playoff game, blah, blah, blah. But for fantasy, this is a fantasy roundup. For fantasy, this is a big move, a big boost, like you said, gave to the Saints offense because with Derek Carr, you actually have a deep ball element, which is something they had briefly with Jameis Winston. But as we all know, Jameis Winston just couldn't get healthy, wasn't consistent, made too many mistakes to where he couldn't keep the job, to where Andy Dalton was the quarterback for most of last season. And no disrespect to Andy, but the bottom line was they just were not pushing the ball down the field consistently. Every now and then, Chris Olave had a nice year, but he left a lot of air yards on the table. He could have had an even better rookie year had he had a quarterback who could have gotten it to him. Rashid Shaheed had his moments, but was just kind of hit or miss because, as we all know, Andy Dalton doesn't have the strongest arm. But now you've got Derek Carr in there. And yeah, Derek Carr's got an arm. Derek Carr can
For
sling it.
sure.
He's not that old. He's still early 30s. Yeah, OG Sean the Don saying, I can't wait to see how this plays out for us. Yeah, I feel like the Saints are in a good spot with Carr because with the Saints defense, as long as Carr doesn't make too many mistakes, they'll be in good shape. And with him being able to push the ball down the field, I feel like it could be a winning recipe. And then Jerry tuning in. Thanks for tuning in, man.
Let me tell you the one surprise statement that I'll make, and I know his fantasy value right now is not all that high because of the off-field issues. I think this really helps Alvin Kamara's fantasy stock in the long run because teams no longer have to focus on just containing him. Like you mentioned earlier, the Saints now have a deep threat and someone who can sling the ball around the field. So I think this is going to benefit everybody. Alvin Kamara might be the biggest beneficiary of all of this, though.
For sure. That's if he plays. Unfortunately, we got
Yep.
the legal saga surrounding Kamara. And yeah, probably. If he does play, it probably won't be for the full season. So the Saints are definitely going to have to address the running back spot either through the draft or free agency. But let's go over some headlines here because Derek Carr wasn't the only breaking news going down. He had some other big news, a lot of stuff going down today because today was franchise tag day, the deadline for teams to apply to franchise tag. to anybody. Or if you didn't tag someone today, well, they're going to be an unrestricted free agent if they were going to be that. So we had Daniel Jones. People thought he was going to get tagged, but ended up agreeing to a contract extension with the New York Giants. And as a result, they were able to franchise tag Pro Bowl running back Saquon Barkley. And the Ravens couldn't agree to a deal with Lamar Jackson, so they applied the non-exclusive franchise tag to him. Some people thought they'd apply the exclusive, but this non-exclusive tells me that they might be open to trading Lamar. I still don't think that's likely, but it could be possible. Falcons reportedly aren't going to enter those sweepstakes, but somebody might. Somebody that really needs a quarterback, and that somebody could be the New York Jets because they missed out on Derek Carr, reportedly meeting the data with Aaron Rodgers trying to seek a trade from the Packers because it doesn't appear that Aaron Rodgers and the Packers are going to stay together. It looks like the Packers are ready to move on to Jordan Love. And then, of course, Derek Carr signs with the Saints. And Geno Smith re-upped with the Seahawks. That was big because the Seahawks were facing they didn't have any quarterbacks on their roster, but now they've got Geno locked up. Looks like they'll be pretty set there.
Yeah, I think the biggest move here is probably Daniel Jones too. I'm someone who, in all of my dynasty leagues, I am so high on Daniel Jones because we saw last year what he could do under Brian Daboll first year. Once you put more weapons around him, especially in the receiving core, and as you mentioned, they franchise tagged Saquon Barkley, he's only going to get better. So I really like Daniel Jones, and I like this move that he now gets to stay with Brian Daboll and the Giants.
Right, yeah, and he's young, I mean, in our group chat, Zach didn't seem too fond of the contract, but I feel like considering his age, I don't think it was a bad deal. I mean, he's still only like mid-20s, came out of the 2019 draft class. I mean, you can make a case that he's been the best quarterback from that class because Kyler Murray's been inconsistent now coming off an ACL. So, I mean, Daniel Jones probably going to never be at the level of like Josh Allen or something, but he's a quality starter in this league, I'd say. So, yeah, that was a good move. And then, yeah, the Rodgers thing, pretty interesting. I'll have more on that later in the sound off segment here to close out the show. But yeah, let's talk a lot of football here to start. We'll have more football talk coming up here in just a few minutes with our special guest. But let's talk a little baseball here. We'll start off with the first base position. We're going to go position by position here for fantasy baseball rankings. We've got infielders and catchers today. And then we'll have, on next week's show, we'll go over outfielders and pitchers. Since there's more of those, we'll get infield and catchers knocked out here today. So yeah, let's start off with first base. We've got Vlad Jr. coming in at number 1 in my ranks, followed by Pete Alonso, Freddie Freeman, Paul Goldschmidt, and Matt Olson. All guys that capable of 30-plus home runs, solid batting averages, but at first base, it's like, it just doesn't seem like there's quite as many of those, like, just sure things. Like back in the day, Gabe, used to have Albert Pujols, Ryan Howard, Prince Fielder, guys that you knew what you were getting every year. Well, you still have a few of those guys, but just doesn't seem like they're quite as productive. And then with Vlad Jr., I know he's really good and has that ceiling, but to me, the biggest question is coming off of last year, is he the undisputed number 1 first baseman?
That's tough. I think if he plays up to his potential and the Blue Jays finally, kind of come around and mature and start playing consistent baseball, yes. I'd say maybe not, though, just because you have that fantastic pitching in the AL East in teams like the Yankees. But I think he's the most talented player here, and I think on his day he is the best first baseman, undisputed number 1 overall. But then you look at the guys below him, you name, Pete Alonso had kind of an off year last year, but he was really good
still at 40
in the years
bombs.
leading up to it. And, yeah, exactly. And that's a down year for him, and, just guys like that, the Mets only got better. Freddie Freeman, he's going to be expected to step up even more now that the Dodgers lost Trey Turner and they didn't do as much. So I don't know. And then obviously Paul Goldschmidt's a model of consistency, Matt Olson with the Braves, and then Jose Abreu with the Astros. Depending on where he slots into the lineup, it'll probably be in that 4 or 5, probably the 5 spot, depending on Jordan Alvarez's health. He's got a lot of potential for a lot of RBIs as well, and also the Crawford boxes and left at Minute Maid. So I think to answer your question, come full circle, I think Vladimir Guerrero is the guy that people should look at as the number 1 overall first baseman. But there is quality in 1 through 6, 1 through 7 in your
Right,
rankings,
right.
obviously.
Yeah, because they also have, as far as the younger guys, also the Italian breakfast there for the Royals, Vinny Pasquantino, guys like that coming up. So, yeah, the first
Exactly.
base is it might not be quite as, not have quite as many proven guys, but there's still enough quality there to where it's one of the more productive positions. So let's move on to third base here before we bring on Justin to talk combine. So at third base, man, you got some big names at the top, but there's just not a whole lot of depth here. I didn't find the top of the chart's pretty strong though. I had Jose Ramirez at the top there, the definition of consistency, followed by Manny Machado, Austin Riley, Nolan Arenado, and former LSU boy Alex Bregman. But the name that I find the most polarizing here is the Orioles prospect Gunnar Henderson. Because if Gunnar Henderson reaches his potential, he could really be something special. So I know he's young and just barely got a cup of coffee in the majors last year, but I mean, I don't know about you, Gabe, but I think there's a chance he could crack the top 5 as soon as this season.
I don't know about the top 5. Obviously, we saw what talented Orioles rookies could do last year with Adley Rutchman coming up. We'll talk about him later. I don't know if there's enough opportunity to get runs in that Orioles lineup just yet. They didn't do a ton in the offseason. And, I mean, those guys you mentioned toward the top, Manny Machado, J. Ram, Austin Riley, Alex Bregman, those guys are all in lineups that are – Arenado, all in lineups that are absolutely stacked. They're consistent. They're veterans. You know what you're going to get out of them. I just think – I don't know. There's an uncertainty around it, but if he fills his potential, you never know. I just think top 5 might be a little too hefty of an ask in his first year. Top 10 for sure, though.
Yeah, for sure, top 10. Yeah, I don't think he'll quite reach top 5 either, but the reason I think it's possible is because he can steal bases. I mean, he's a 2020 threat. So with that, if he can, especially, with the bigger bases this year, stolen bases expected to go up, if he could steal 20, 25 bags, that could get him up there because guys like Arenado and even Bregman, they just don't steal a whole lot. Like J-Ram, we know he's going to get his 2020. And then Riley, even Riley, he's more of a power guy too. So if for those that play, I know a lot of y'all still play the 5x5 roto. So in those formats, Henderson could do it, but yeah, probably not quite his time. Since he's
it's interesting that you mentioned
young.
the yeah, for sure. It's interesting that you mentioned the bigger bases, though. I didn't even think of this until now. You might be seeing a lot more steals throughout Major League Baseball this year, not only because of the bigger bases, but because the pitch clocks, they're also limiting the amount of pickoffs you can have. So I bet some of these guys toward the top, some of their stolen base numbers go up. So it definitely benefits a rookie, too.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah, those young guys, the young, hungry, Bobby Witt Jr. is another name. He's a third base eligible in a lot of formats. So he's another name to keep an eye on at the top of these third base rankings. So, but with that being said, we'll have more baseball here in a few. We're going to move on here to our NFL Combine talk with our very special guest. He's a scouting guru. He's always in the trenches there trying to scout out the young talent before they become mainstream, try to get y'all ahead of the curve. He's big on Instagram with his fantasy follow page, some of the best dynasty year-round fantasy football content out there. So let's bring him out here on the Fantasy Roundup. Justin Jackson from Fantasy Follow. What's up, man?
Hey, Spencer. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure. Always good to come and talk some ball with you. Here, I mean, we're only in March and we're talking football, so that's a good thing. And before we know it, we'll be at the draft, and then redraft will be starting in fantasy. So Yes, it was great to have some football this past weekend, and looking forward to chopping it up here. So.
Oh yeah,
It's
for
always
sure, man,
football
for
season.
sure. Yeah, it's a year-round thing, bro. Yep. So yeah, we're gonna rearrange it here. We'll have Gabe back on here in just a few, and he'll probably have a question or two for Justin. But until then, we'll have it. We got this new format here with the graphics. So let's start it off with the quarterback position. As far as their stock here, we're gonna talk rookies and see who's trending up, who's trending down here right before the draft. So after the combine, Justin, I know you keep a close eye on all that. It seems pretty clear that there's a big 4 quarterback prospect this year. And those 4, Bryce Young from Alabama, C.J. Stroud from Ohio State, Will Levis from Kentucky, and Anthony Richardson from Florida. Had a lot of buzz surrounding these guys. But which of the 4 would you say improved their stock the most coming off the 2023 scouting combine?
Well, that's not close. Anthony Richardson from Florida, he absolutely just blew the combine up. I mean, he put on an absolute clinic, a show. He was looking like he was going to be a first-round pick, and everybody knew he was athletic, but he had record performances for the quarterback position, in couple different categories, and measured in at 6'4", 244, just an absolute beast, and ran a 4.43, just unthinkable of somebody of that size. And in fantasy, it's like we're geared towards the running quarterback. I mean, and we knew he was the runner, or he could run, but we even those of us that were high on him could not have expected this type of just record-setting performance, in testing. So, he was probably already a top 10 pick, but now, all the talk is, can he go number 1 overall? So.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me like with Cam Newton, back he was over 10 years ago now, but that he was somebody that he runs too much, he's a project, blah, 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 but all the physicals were there to the point where he ended up number 1 overall. I think that was kind of a weak class. I forgot who else was in there. But his class is fairly strong at the top, but I feel like, Young's got the size concern. Stroud looks pretty well-rounded, but doesn't seem to have any one thing in particular that's super strong. And then Levis, viewed as kind of a prospect, is Richardson. I guess another thing on Richardson, Justin, is what would you respond to someone that says, well, I don't want Anthony Richardson on my team. He's too much of a project. He didn't do much in college. Like, why would I even want this guy? Why would I think about spending the number 1 pick on this guy? Look what happened with Trey Lance, Zach Wilson. Like, these guys, everyone, they had the physicals, but they've so far not lived up to it. What makes Anthony Richardson worthy of being a top selection, you think?
One word: ceiling. He has the biggest ceiling, and it's not even close. He can be taught to play quarterback. There's quarterback gurus out there. There's the offenses now in the NFL are trending more towards, RPOs, run pass options, spread. And he really wasn't as inaccurate as this narrative out there of people saying. Sure, he can improve on his short game passing, but all these guys can when they're coming out of college. And in fantasy, we honestly, if he can't deliver a short pass and he puts it down and runs, I mean, that's not bad for the bottom line of fantasy. I mean, so this guy just, he's a monster. I hope he goes to the right landing spot with the right coaching that'll use him correctly. And, we've got another potential, QB1 on our hands here in fantasy.
Yeah, hopefully so. And I was hearing the rumors today that, the Seahawks could be a landing spot, even though they just re-signed Geno, which wouldn't be good for Richardson's like immediate value, but long-term could be a good fit because Geno, getting up in age probably won't be there more than another year or 2.
Yeah, it'd be a little disappointing. I think Geno signed a 3-year deal. Honestly, dynasty owners, we don't want to wait 3 years
right
for Anthony. But Yeah, I mean, systematic, that makes sense. I mean, that would make sense, the fit wise, but you'd have to wait. And in fantasy, we just don't want to wait.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And then a little more about Bryce Young here before we move on to running backs. I know when we were texting the other day, it says you're just concerned about his size. They look like just so much smaller than the other prospects. To where, do you feel that he's expected to go at the top, but do you feel that size is going to ultimately limit his potential in the NFL?
I do. He came in at 5'10", 203, but the 203, it didn't look like a legit 203 to me. He played at 193 last year, and that's not 203 does not look like his natural weight to me. But I don't know. It's like, he does everything well, but the size is a concern. I mean, we just have a handful of quarterbacks that at that size have done well. It's just it's tough. It's just tough, and I don't really see a massive room for growth there with Young. I think he's kind of already there. I mean, he's developed, and I just don't know how much more growth he'll have. So I do have some concerns, and it's the size. Can he hold up this is a game now where you need the defensive players are so big, and just to be able to hold up. He doesn't pack on the weight like a Kyler Murray. You look at a Kyler Murray, he's bigger, broader shoulders, and Young just doesn't look like he has that on his frame. So
yeah, we shall see. But let's move on to running backs here. And it looks like a pretty good running back class. A lot of intriguing names, including Tyjae Spears here from our backyard. Went to Tulane and had a really good college career, especially this past year. Really had a breakout season where he became a legit NFL draft prospect and is now appears to be well on his way to being a day 2 selection, it seems like. Do you feel like after his combine performance, Justin, that he's going to be selected there in the 2nd, 3rd round range?
Yeah, looks like he's moved up to day 2 now with this performance at the combine, and then he was also outstanding at the Senior Bowl. He was regarded by many that were there as the top running back. He really balled out there, and the only really concern was he has an ACL from back in 2020, but he's fully recovered from that. He looks explosive, maybe a little bit on the lighter side, but, for a running back, you kind of want to get to that 205 line. He came in at 201 at the combine, but, he was explosive in his testing, his vertical jump, his broad jump. I mean, he didn't run the 40, but those metrics there tend to lean towards the fact that if he would run fast, I think he would have ran in the mid 4.4s based on his other measurables. So, yeah, I mean, he's an explosive talent. If you watch any of him on film, he's just dynamic. He's just explosive, and he looks to be, a top 5 to 7 in Dynasty right now, depending on, where you rank them. There's a couple of the other big names up higher than him, but he's a nice looking player. So I think he's moved up from round 4 into maybe round 2 or 3, probably round 3. Round 2 is pretty high for a running back, but we'll see.
For sure. Could be a good fit for the Saints. Could end up staying here at NOLA. But let's talk about the top of the class here. I know Bijan Robinson, the big name there, probably going to be a 1st rounder. And then the Gibbs kid from Alabama seemed to have improved his stock as well. And I know you had talked to somebody, Justin, that you felt was really high on Gibbs. So tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, so, everyone's talking about Bijan, as they should. He's a generational type back. He's done nothing short of be, just pretty much does everything well. We've been talking about him in Dynasty. People have been trading Dynasty assets away in order to prepare to get him at the 1.01 this year. I mean, and now just some of the picks that folks are giving up in order to get to Bijan. It's crazy. But anyway, I think that my point here is Jahmyr Gibbs is being slept on a little bit. He is very, very skilled. As a receiver, that's very, very well known. But over the weekend, I was talking with Coach Jerry Seymour from the running back academy down in Miami-Dade, and Coach Seymour trains, you name it, Jonathan Taylor, Travis Etienne, Leonard Fournette, Melvin Gordon. I mean, he's like one of the top at doing this. And he's trained many of the backs that are in this class, including Gibbs. And I said, Coach, how good is this kid? What separates Jahmyr Gibbs from other running backs? I wanted to hear his opinion. He said, he's just like a Swiss Army knife. It's like, it's hard for defensive coordinators to game plan for him. And he helps offensive coordinators open up their playbooks, because he can do so much. He's so versatile. And, I was like, but okay, so we know he's a great pass catcher, right? But how good of a runner is he, Coach? I think, are we overlooking his talent as a running back? And he says, as a pure runner, he brings unpredictability because he can go outside. He can play, he can play in between the tackles and run in between the tackles. And, so he could do it all. I mean, he ran a 4.36. He's insanely fast, and he's just a nice looking prospect. And just looking at some other, as far as he did not have a fumble this past season. I mean, he had almost 500 touches with no fumbles. I mean, so ball secured. Yeah, and just sky's the limit for this kid. I mean, everybody's on Bijan as they should be, but Gibbs is going to be, he could be the 1.02 in Dynasty, and then come around redraft season. It's like, depending on where he goes, he could be a value. Everyone's going to be on Bijan, and you just run right in and snatch Gibbs up.
100%. It'll be interesting to see where he lands. So let's move on to receivers here. And this receiver class doesn't look as intriguing as the past few years. We've been spoiled, man. So many great wide receiver prospects. Still got a few pretty good ones this year, including Jackson Smith and Jigba, who didn't play much his past year in college, but still is regarded as the number one receiver prospect by a lot of folks. So after the combine, Justin, do you still feel that Jackson Smith and Jigba is the number one wide receiver prospect in this class?
Yeah, he stamped it. He stamped it with his workout at the combine. Although he didn't run the 40, he was more than athletic enough. And, in the broad, the 3-cone, the shuttle, his metrics there show he's very twitched up. And I saw that on film. I'm like, this guy, he gets in the open field and he's just hard to bring down. He's a twitched up Keenan Allen is kind of like what I saw. And, he's tremendous route runner, got those Devontae Adams releases off the line. I mean, he played, with two guys, with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, who we love and everybody loves. And he played with them and he was like the alpha to a degree. And they were like, oh, he's better. They both said he's better than we are. And, obviously the year off was disappointing, but he's going to be fantasy relevant this season already. I mean, in redraft, he's going to be, he could catch 100 balls this year. I mean, we'll see where he goes, but he's got all the tools. So
hopefully he lands in a good spot. But as we saw last year, I mean, his former teammates Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, neither of them landed in great spots, but they still balled out. So Jackson Smith and Jigba, sky's the limit for that kid, I'd say. And then we've got a few other names to watch. I'd say, Quentin Johnson, Jalen Hyatt, Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers. So it's just still should be a fairly productive receiver class. But a name I'd want to ask you about, Justin, because I know we got a lot of LSU folks listening, is Kayshon Boutte, man. His stock is just, it seems like it's plummeting, unfortunately, because he was going to come back to LSU and then ends up with the issues there, he's like, all right, fine, I'll go into the draft, and seems like his combine did not go smoothly.
What happened? That's what I'm like, what the heck happened here? Because, you know, I mean, he ran a 4.5, which wasn't terrible, but then he was like barely 29-inch vert. I mean, like me and you could probably still jump 29, like in the vertical. Like, what the? Yeah, and you know, he wasn't good in any of the other testing he did, and you know, it's kind of become like it's become a falling from grace with Boutte. I mean,
yes, he was thought to be a physical specimen. He was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. I covered him out of Westgate High, and he was thought to be a freaking first-round talent if all things went well. But unfortunately, not looking like
the next big,
there.
You know, like after Jefferson, Chase.
Right, yeah, he was thought to be the next LSU wide receiver star, and I mean, shoot, another kid I covered locally, of Malik Neighbors, went to Como High, and that's actually my alma mater in Lafayette, and he balled out last year. I know he's not draft eligible yet, but it was just goes to show you just never know. But we'll see. Maybe Kayshawn will up his stock here, but not looking good right now. So before we conclude here with Justin, let's move on to the tight end position, which is looking pretty promising, I must say. I mean, looking like a lot of intriguing tight end prospects, more so than usual. And the one that's really standing out is Michael Mayer from Notre Dame. So do you think, Justin, that he'll be able to make an immediate fantasy impact in 2023?
For the most part, I do. He didn't have the greatest of combines. You know, I kind of feel like coming out of the combine, it's more like he's still the TE1, and you know, he could go to one of these great landing spots, you know, that need tight ends. You know, the Bengals, the Chargers. Those are a couple, and you know, he just didn't blow me away. I mean, he's just solid in everything he does. I will say that. He has no weak skill level of any kind. He's very solid. But he just kind of lacks a little bit of like the explosiveness. I think some of the other guys kind of narrowed the gap a little bit. You know, the Musgraves and then Darnell Washington put on a historical type performance as well. And, you know, these guys are all going to be starting tight ends in the NFL. I mean, all the way through, like down to like 6 of them. Tucker Kraft, Sam Laporta, Dalton Kincaid is like a Dawson Knox clone. I mean, you see this makes these acrobatic catches in the air. He's going to be a nice player, but it takes tight ends time in fantasy. You know, we usually got to wait a year.
Yeah, for sure.
So it could be the case. I mean, one of them could be good right away. 2 of them could be good. Maybe we got to wait on a bunch of them for next year. We just don't know with tight ends. They do take longer to develop, but I mean, these are all great prospects. Luke Musgrave is another one.
Yeah, he's one from Oregon.
They all look great, you know.
Yeah, Musgrave, from Oregon State. Kincaid from
Utah, he had a great
Pac-12 boys showing out there, and then Washington, the big dude from Georgia, didn't really get involved that much as a receiver, but definitely has all the physical tools, I'd say.
Yeah, I tell you what, Washington, he could be like a 6th offensive lineman with the blocking, you know, because he's so massive and athletic. But, like, if you get him the ball in space, like, he literally – I feel bad for these DBs, man. They got to, like, make a business decision out there with this big truck coming at him. And then you watch the film, and he hurdles. He'll go to the hurdle. He'll jump right over him. At that size, to be able to have that type of agility, man, it's just so impressive. You know, so – we'll see. And you don't need much in fantasy to be relevant at the tight end position. It's like, you know, 10 points and you're happy. So any of these guys could hopefully deliver that. But we'll see. You know, even the tight end position's like being some talk of like removing it from fantasy altogether. But that's for another show.
Yeah, I mean, there's still enough talent there to keep it, but that's just my take. We'll get to that later on in the summer, I'm sure. But yeah, Justin, thanks for coming on, man. Any final combine thoughts before you sign off? Or
Uh,
that's we about covered it, for
no, I mean, it
quarterbacks,
was a great
running
combine.
backs,
It
receivers,
was,
tight ends.
yeah.
So yeah, for sure, man. But I'll let you run then if that's all you got.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I mean, there's plenty of guys we can talk about, that others that did well. Um, Zach Charbonnet, another
Yeah,
running back that
UCLA
did
running
well.
back. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, one of my favorites is Roschon Johnson, who played backups to Bijan. Not a lot of people are on him, but he's very talented, and I think he could be a sleeper out of this class. And you mentioned Zay Flowers is another one that moved up, and he could do some things as well. Quentin Johnston we didn't mention, but one thing about Quentin Johnston,
Yeah,
he actually measured in
TCU,
at
yeah.
6'2". Yeah, he measured at 6'2". I thought he was 6'4", and he was, like, that's kind of like a bad thing for receivers. He came in a little bit shorter, which is good, and then 40 and a half inch vertical, 11.2 in the broad, 208. You know, he's got big hands, 9 5/8 inch hands. He could, go up there and get it, win those jump balls. I thought Johnston solidified himself as the wide receiver too in this class. And there was a lot of question about him, because he only had like 1 year of production, but he looks the part. So, but well, I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, good
congrats
deal,
on the new show, and
thank you, sir.
we'll talk ball later this spring, and as we get into redraft and all that stuff. So, appreciate it.
100%. Yeah, thanks for coming on, Justin. Have a good one, man. All right, really appreciate Justin coming on there from Fantasy Follow, giving us the insight on all things NFL draft, NFL combine. Got a lot go down there, Gabe. Man, what's any takeaways from all that? Justin had the info for us there on all the big positions for fantasy.
Yeah, for sure. The one thing he was talking about, how everyone's given up everything to get Bijan Robinson stock. I had someone, I'm actually in a new dynasty league this year. I had someone give up a second round pick to get the number 1 spot in the rookie draft. It's a startup league. They gave up a second round pick because they're that confident in Bijan Robinson. So it says a lot about his talent, but there's also some other talented running backs. And as far as Kayshon Boutte, there's a lot of LSU receivers in the NFL. I just don't know where he'll be on that scale. Right now, it's not looking like he'll be a Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson level. Could he have a career of someone consistent like a Jarvis Landry, or will he just completely fall off like some of those other bottom guys? You just don't know. The talent's there. I just don't know if the athleticism's there. I don't know if the heart's there now. Hopefully it is. I love Kayshon Boutte, and when he's at his best, he's probably the most exciting receiver in this draft. I'd go that far.
Yeah, hopefully he can get his stock back up because when he's right, I mean he could end up being a steal. I mean if he's
Absolutely.
right. Yeah, so someone's saying we got no audio. Can you hear me, Gabe?
I can hear you.
Okay, yeah, hopefully we're all good now. I believe we're all good. If anyone else can't hear, please comment. But I think we're good. Let's move on to finish up the rest of these baseball rankings here. We got the next position, second base, and Jose Altuve, the seasoned vet. Once again, the consensus number 1 second baseman in fantasy. But a name to me that's really intriguing, Jazz Chisholm for the Miami Marlins, because I know he's been hurt a lot, but when healthy, he's a guy that's flashed a lot of potential. And to me, the biggest question here is, can Jazz Chisholm supplant Jose Altuve as the number 1 second baseman? Because if he's healthy, I think it's a close contest.
I think the only thing that Jazz Chisholm has over Jose Altuve in terms of fantasy value is the fact that he's now going to be classified as an outfielder and a second baseman.
Oh,
So
yeah, and the
you have a lot of
ability.
room there. Yeah, for sure. And those are the most valuable players in fantasy baseball other than starters who can be classified as relievers, but that's a talk for another day. I don't think Jazz Chisholm has surpassed Jose Altuve. I don't think he will this season until we see that sharp decline from Altuve, which we haven't yet seen. I think the Astros lineup is just too talented. Those changes to the pitch clock and the bigger bases, as I alluded to earlier, those will help Altuve a lot. And he's just, he gives you everything. He's 5'6", but he gives you that 30 home run power, 20, 30 home runs a year. He'll get those stolen bases. He drives in runs, and he scores runs too because he's going to be at the top of that Astros lineup. It's just a question of whether or not the guys in front of him in the middle innings can get on and he gets those opportunities for RBIs. The thing is he's always going to hover around that 300 line, and I just don't know if Jazz Chisholm's there yet. So we'll have to see. I hope he will because he's one of the most exciting players in baseball when he's on his game.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, because it's like, I mean, as far as the batting average, Altuve is definitely going to have that over him. I just think with the power speed combo he offers that he's got the chance to get there, but has to stay healthy, though. And speaking of guys that can't stay healthy, let's talk shortstops. And Fernando Tatis Jr., man, so polarizing, yet so injury-prone. Very similar to Jazz Chisholm in that he's shifting over to outfield this year, so he'll have that, as Gabe mentioned, that valuable dual eligibility. But, man, it's just, is he really worth the risk as a top 30 pick? Because if you want Tatis, you're going to have to still take him up that high.
Yeah, you will. I know you have him sitting at number 6 in your shortstop rankings, and I think that's about where he should be. I don't think he should be in front of any of those guys. And I would even argue that Corey Seager could be above him as well, just because of what Corey Seager was able to do.
Bo Bichette, Xander Bogaerts, Bobby Witt, and Francisco Lindor ahead of him.
Yeah, I think all of those guys are better picks at shortstop than him. Tatis is an exciting player. Obviously, he's still got a few games on that suspension. He's just coming off from injury. So because of all those question marks, I would say maybe not a top 30 pick this year. I wouldn't call someone out for taking him top 30, certainly, because he's that exciting. But I personally would not take him top 30 now.
Yeah, I don't think I would either. Maybe top 40. Maybe if he's there in the 4th, it's like, man, the upside so tempting. But yeah, I don't think I could pull the trigger. I don't see myself having Tatis in any leagues this year.
Yeah, I think the thing is I don't know if other people are going to take that risk either. So there you might get some fantastic value because I think Fernando Tatis is one of the most versatile players in the National League for sure, if not all of baseball when he's healthy.
Oh, yeah, when he's healthy.
He's an MVP caliber player. Yeah, for sure, when he's on top of his game and healthy. So I just think right now there's too many unanswered questions to take him that high. But whoever takes him, wherever you take him, you're going to get good value there because he's going to produce for you.
100%. And our last position here before we close out with my sound off rant is the catcher position. It's not a sexy position, not many productive hitters, but there is an intriguing name here that's made his way into most people's top 5s, including mine, Adley Rutchman with the Orioles. And he's had a lot of hype surrounding him as a top prospect and did well in limited at-bats last season. And it's one of those things to where, like, it's just not many good hitting catchers to where if Rutchman keeps this up, I think he might end up being MLB's next elite catcher because Buster Posey's retired, Yadier Molina's retired. It's just not a very deep position where I'm thinking the future is now for Rutchman.
Yeah, that's why I would, if you're looking at the question on screen, will Adley Rutchman be the MLB's next elite catcher? I think the answer is no, solely because I think he already is. I don't think he will be. I think he is. As you mentioned, that catcher position is not sexy. There's not a lot of good names there. There's an obvious number 1 right now in GT Realmuto.
Yeah, he steals bases
to stay there. Exactly. He's a surprising base stealer, and you don't see that from catchers very often, But I think Adley Rutchman, because of his ability at the plate And he's just such a raw player and a raw talent. We've already seen what he can do. He can only get better from here. I think Adley Rutchman is the second best catcher in baseball going forward for me.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, because they also got a Dalton Varsho. He's got dual eligibility there, catcher and outfield. He can steal some bases. And then Salvador Perez still in the mix with the Royals and Will Smith of the Dodgers. But yeah, other than those, I mean, shoot, I'd take Rutchman over anybody else.
Yeah, me too.
So there you have it for our early fantasy baseball thoughts. Y'all make sure to head on over to bet.NOLA.com for the full positional rankings and analysis. And like I said, next week we'll have outfielders, starting pitchers, and relief pitchers broken down. So, all right, Gabe, it's time, man. Got a rant here. Got a rant because
Love it.
I'm not the biggest Aaron Rodgers fan in the world, but my God, is he getting hated on for just like, it's just ridiculous. I mean, man, I know he's doing things kind of unconventionally, did the retreat and all that, but let the man be. I mean, he has the right to do what he wants. He's a 4-time MVP, Super Bowl champion, been in the league almost 20 years. I mean, if he wants to do things differently, so what? I mean, the new league year hadn't even started yet. And my take on Rodgers is that all this hate, all this negativity in the media toward him is just going to fuel him, just like it did before 2020, to where I don't think he's done yet. I was thinking maybe he would be done after the emotional walk off of Lambeau when they lost to Detroit, but I don't think he's done. And I also don't think he'll be back in Green Bay because it's apparent that Green Bay wants to move on to Jordan Love. So it's kind of like a repeat of the Brett Favre Aaron Rodgers thing when it was clear that Green Bay was ready for Rodgers. So Favre ended up moving to the New York Jets, which is ironically enough where Rodgers could move to because they're meeting today about a potential trade, which I think the difference here, though, is that when Favre went there, he just didn't really have the support, where with Rodgers going there, I mean, he's going to have potentially elite number one receiver in Garrett Wilson, a strong running game with Breece Hall, a solid offensive line to where just watch when he goes somewhere with better support, because the fact was that Green Bay last year did not give him what he needed. Rookie wideouts, banged up offensive line, just wasn't cutting it. I mean, it was clear that they were wanting him out the door. And so I think when he goes somewhere, new coach, he'll be reunited with Nathaniel Hackett, his former offensive coordinator, if he goes to the Jets. Or if he would, the only other option I feel would be the Raiders. Even there, I don't think he'd do as well, but he'd be reunited with Devontae Adams. So I don't think he's done yet. He's a 4-time MVP, Super Bowl champ. He's still got that chip on his shoulder, I feel. So just watch. Don't bury the man yet. And any thoughts, Gabe?
Completely agree with your rant. I think Aaron Rodgers is someone who just obviously all the quirky aspects of whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to say about Aaron Rodgers off the field. I think all of this talk of, he's going to leave or trying to force him out of Green Bay, I think that fuels him. And I think if he goes to the Jets, he's worth a fantasy flyer again, because he's, as you mentioned, got all those weapons around him. And we know Aaron Rodgers isn't going to turn the ball over. He's going to throw for a lot of yards, a lot of touchdowns. That's just who he is. And so that's my thoughts on the matter.
For sure. Yeah, I have to have Jim on. I know he wasn't too fond of Rodgers there, but I mean, shoot, he just can't deny the track record. I know he's getting old. I know he kind of fell off. But remember when Tom Brady's last year in New England didn't go so well and everyone was ready to bury him, then he had to change the scenery, and guess what? Super Bowl champion.
Yep. No, I'm not going to predict that. I'm not going to go out of my way and say that's going to happen, but I think from a fantasy perspective, Aaron Rodgers, if he goes to the Jets, is still a top option for anyone.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, and that's I don't think I'll be real. I don't think he leads the Jets to the Super Bowl if that's where he ends up. But yeah, for fantasy, I think he gets back to being a QB1, and that's what we're focused on here on the fantasy roundup. So I think that's going to wrap it up, man. unless you had any final thoughts before we sign off here.
Nope, think I picked my brain enough for today on fantasy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, ran a little long, so appreciate Justin for coming on here, giving us all that NFL Combine insight. So yeah, for Gabe Henderson, I'm Spencer the Guru Urquhart. Appreciate y'all for tuning in to the Fantasy Roundup here on the Bayou Bets channels. Make sure to check us out, bet.NOLA.com. Follow us on social media, all that good stuff. So couldn't do it without y'all. We'll be back next Tuesday at 4 p.m. for another episode. And as far as our betting shows, will be back Thursday at 4 p.m. Zach and Jim will have Bayou Bets for y'all. So until then, y'all have a good one. Peace.